Drum roll, please. So I'd like to introduce our guest speaker. I painstakingly was up all night putting together this bio here, so...
I didn't use AI. We use AI now.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't think of that. So Grant Cameron is the recipient of the Leeds Conference International Researcher of the Year, the UFO Congress Researcher of the Year Awards. And he's been involved in ufology as the Vietnam War ended in 1975 with personal sightings of UFO-type object, which locally became known as, in Manitoba, as Charlie Red Star. So these sightings led to a decade of research into early work done by the Canadian government into the flying saucer phenomenon. Cameron became the authority on the program, and Wilbur B. Smith, who headed it up. So from here, Mr. Cameron proceeded to do almost 3 decades of research into the role of the President of the United States in the UFO mystery. He's one of the foremost authorities on Hillary Clinton. Well, can't blame him too much for that. And Donald Trump, that's okay, and their UFO connection. And most of that research is found in the President's UFO website. He's also in 2 books, he's written 2 books, the Clinton UFO Storybook and Managing Magic, the government's UFO disclosure plan. So after experiencing a mental download event on February 26, 2012, Grant turned his research interests away from nuts and bolts research into the role of consciousness and the UFO phenomenon. And I've been doing that as well. I published my first book in 1999, a Buddhist book. I have 3 with a chapter on Buddhism and UFOs. So I've been into the consciousness aspect for since the beginning in terms of my thinking about it. So this new research has expanded out to the possible involvement of extraterrestrials in modern music. I've just been reading his book on the SkyTrain coming here. I'll just read it for you. It's called Tuned In, The Paranormal World of Music. I highly recommend it. Boy, we can do a whole talk on just that. And the aspects of inspirations and downloads in science, discoveries, inventions, Nobel Prizes, music, art, books, near-death experiences, meditation, and with individuals known as savants and prodigies. Oh, thank you, Grant. Yeah. So Cameron has lectured widely in Canada, the United States, and Europe. He was one of 40 witnesses that testified in front of 6 ex-senators and congressmen of Washington for the Citizens Hearing on Disclosure. He has appeared in many television documentaries on UFOs, being interviewed by nearly 200 radio shows, including a series of appearances on Coast to Coast AM. So maybe as chairman, I should, when you get to the Q&A period, I should try to stop you from talking so people can ask questions.
Yep.
So Grant, take it away.
Okay. Thanks for that intro. And in fact, you're talking about, just for a heads up, I'm actually doing Coast to Coast Tuesday night
Really?
at midnight, yeah, or it starts midnight. So.
Yeah, we should say the date. Today is October the 4th, Sputnik Day. Today's Sputnik.
Is that today's Sputnik?
Yeah, that they launched Sputnik 1957 on this
There
day.
you go. Beat the Americans into
2025.
outer space. So I don't do that much lecturing anymore. I do a lot of research, especially when I found artificial intelligence. And you're going to see I have the presidentialufo.org website. I have the White House UFO YouTube site, which has a lot of it's being moved to the website, but I had about 600 videos on there of people. I've interviewed most of the big names in ufology. And the other thing I have, we're starting now, is we're putting up a lot of podcasts, artificial intelligence podcasts, which are really good. I mean, it's amazing what they can do. So we're going to put up a lot of them, and we're actually doing one. You have the book Contact Modalities. We're actually putting a podcast up on that in probably be up in 2 or 3 weeks. Contact Modalities was probably the biggest book we ever wrote. I have a partner, Desta Barnabe, who, according to her 2 regressions that she had, was one of the oracles of Delphi in one of her past lives. Wow. And I said, "You were that?" And she goes, "Why, they told me." And she had the regression done the woman that did the one was a woman by the name of Kay Randall May, who's the best medical intuitive in the United States. She's being used by intelligence agencies, and so I got a reading, and then Desta Barnabe, my assistant, got a reading. So we did that Contact Modalities book. And the Contact Modalities book is basically what the theory I've come to now of, in some ways, how it works. The Contact Modality says that in a lot of cases, trauma is what happens. You have trauma, it rips the filter. And then what you have is a situation where we're in this world of, we've walked through the river of forgetfulness. We really don't know what the heck's going on. But there are certain people who are able to get in the field. So Desta is able to channel. She's able to do a lot of this different stuff. And the idea is that you have a right brain and a left brain. The left brain is the male brain. It's the ego. It's the one that wants to have the wars and the fights, and it believes in separation. It believes me first and all this kind of stuff. And then you have the female brain, and the female brain is coming online now, although in the United States it's taken 2 steps back. But the female brain's coming in. The female brain says we all want to be together, and we should all work together. And that's the sort of the ultimate message of the universe is either the separation of the divine, what you separate from the divine and put it into darkness. That same thing will drag you into the darkness with it. What you damn damns you back. What you bless blesses you in return. To say, I am the light and you are not. I am divine and you are not is nothing more than the shadow pretending to be the light. So it's this idea of separation. The female brain believes everything is divine, everything is one, everything's connected. The male brain, which controls the world now, is in this battle of fighting for, rape, pillage, kill, and steal. Whoever's got the most toys wins. So we did that book, and it's on 70 different modalities. So we basically looked at how do people get in the field, and what kind of modalities. So people are using hypnosis, trance stuff, different types of things like pain will cause it, near-death experiences will cause it. You'll always see that in UFO experiences, the people who have been on board the ship, who are, to me, are the most important people there are, because they're actually interacting with the intelligence. If you talk to them, they will basically say at one point during their experience, there's 60% said at one point during their experience, they knew the answer to everything in the universe or everything about themselves. And to me, that's like, why would you not talk to these people? And they forgot it. They couldn't remember what it was when they brought it back. In near-death experiences, which is very closely linked, 31% of people say at one point during their near-death experience they knew the answer to everything in the universe. So everything in the universe, all the answers are there. And so the contact modality idea is some people are able to get in the field, grab the material, and bring it back down. And so I've had this whole search started in 75. And when I saw the object in 75, it came in really close enough that it wanted me to know that you never have to worry about this, whether these things are real. It was right there. And I had no belief in UFOs, couldn't have cared less, and flew right in front of the car. Second night, it flew right at me and then flew off, and as it was flying off, I'm looking at it and I'm like, what's it doing? It's not doing anything. It's just flying along. And so when I have people have UFO sightings, I always say to them, so what was it doing? And they go, it wasn't doing anything. It was just there. And this is the whole idea. It's like, what's actually going on? Like, what is this phenomena? And I figured somebody had to know what was going on. That's why I went after the Canadian government. Then I went after the President of the United States. I figured this guy's got to know what's going on. Went after the former president of Penn State University, who had 14 honorary doctorate degrees. He knew what was going on. He talked in rhymes and riddles. And 30 years later, we started to figure out what he was talking about. And then I had my experience, the download experience, and that's when I moved to figuring that the people who have the answer are the people who are interacting with the intelligence for whatever reason. They're the closest thing you're going to get to figure out what's going on. You can look at all the lights in the sky you want and track red ones, green ones, fast ones, slow ones, whatever. To me, that's a total waste of time. You just, as Dr. Eric Walker told us, he said, admit it, you're just curious. Admit it. Why should we change the rules and regulations to satisfy your curiosity? We don't care if you're curious. You just want to know. And that's basically what most people are. They see the video and that's a pretty cool video, and then someone says, oh, it's a hoax, and then it was, oh, okay. And then they wait for the next video, next statement from the government, and disclosure stuff, and when's disclosure coming, all this kind of stuff. And it just circles round and round and round. And the people who are actually interacting with the intelligence, everybody ostracizes them and won't talk to them. So contact modalities, we go through all these different people who are able to get the stuff. So I spend a lot of time, for example, with channelers. And people will say, well, channelers, they're not just making stuff up. I have a book coming out on a channeler. His name was Andrew Jackson Davis from 1847. So this is the same year, the year before they wrote the Communist Manifesto.
Yeah.
So this is the beginning of the spiritual realm. The Communist Manifesto is the material realm. It starts in both
spiritualism, right? Spiritualism.
Spiritualism and materialism started
with
with the same year. Both of them started the same year. And I'm writing this whole book about, is this a coincidence, 1848?
Is this like good and bad at the same time?
Well, this is the whole idea that the universe works like this. There's this,
Yin and yang.
it's all playing off each other. That
Yeah.
you can't see the light until you see the darkness. That the trauma, like in the contact modalities, people say I don't want trauma, but all the people who had the trauma are the people who come out the other end, and they have this. They suddenly are enlightened, or you see the worst experiences in your life will happen, and those are the things you learn from. When things are going well, the ego is saying, "Oh, I got this all figured out." It's like, just going along, just ignoring everything, and so that's basically is sort of a short version of my trip is to go and to find out what's going on. And I think I have enough that I would be satisfied to sort of leave it and say, okay, I've done that, and I actually sort of gave up. And then the phenomena doesn't let you go. It sort of gives you another synchronicity and drags you back down the rabbit hole. So now I'm actually working on like this AI and 2 books. One on this channeler from 1847, which is to compare his channeling to all the modern channelers, including my partner Desta Barnabe. And she was actually shocked. I said, give me your 2 books. I'm going to put them through the AI. I'm going to compare them to this guy in 1847. So I take the 40 things that were the main things that this guy was saying in his channeling. This is important, 40 things. And I compare it to Desta, 100% agreement. It's like, and she went, wow, I can't believe how agreement. And I go after like Bashar, if you're familiar with Bashar, the famous alien channeler. I do Seth, who is the sort of known as the first channeler of the New Age, 1960s. But actually, this guy was actually first. But she was a very famous channeler, wrote, I think, 30 books or something, all channeled books. And Paul Selleck, who's a guy who, when he channels, and I always say to people, you think you can channel and fool me? There's no way you can do it, because I will make you do what Paul Selleck, and I'll give you $1,000 bet that you can't channel. And what Paul Selleck does is he goes into trance and he talks and he whispers. If you've ever seen him, it's really weird. He whispers half a sentence, then he repeats it. Whispers half a sentence, repeats it. Whispers half a sentence, repeats it. And he goes on for 40 minutes, and he's got, I think, 12 books or 13 books. And in every book, there's no more than 2 edits done. If you take a YouTube video and you take a look at the transcript of a YouTube video, you'll see how many times people go, well, I think, and it's just unbelievable. A channeler will never do that. It's complete. There's no stringing stuff together, and that's how you can tell. And I said, you can go whisper, repeat half a sentence, whisper, repeat half a sentence for a 300-page book and not make any mistakes. I'll give you $1,000. Otherwise, you owe me $1,000. But so I'm very interested in channeling, but basically, I'm trying to find out that somebody's got to know what's going on here. That was my original deal. I don't know how many people have had a paranormal experience, but for anybody about to get a paranormal experience, you can pass this around. I don't know if anybody knows this.
Hitchhiker effect?
This is a banana. This is a mummified banana.
You're making me hungry.
And we have no idea how it happens. All that we know is if you take a banana, I've got my second one actually going now. This one's about 5 years old. You can actually like drill through it like something. It's like a piece of wood. It never rotted. It didn't do anything. You can actually take a banana. It has to be a green banana. You can take a green banana and hold it by its ends. You can do whatever you want. You can think about whatever you want. And I think you hold it for like 2.5 minutes, or you can hold it for like 3 times 1 minute, and the thing will, you just leave it, and the thing will actually mummify. And This was done at McGill University, and it's a paranormal thing. Nobody has a clue how that happens. Everybody just knows.
How does it happen?
Nobody knows. It's the same thing as if anybody ever did the thing when you're kids, where you take the chair, and anybody does this thing with the chair where somebody sits in the chair, you put your hands on around the table, and you put your hands on and you lap them, and then you put your other hand on, you sit there. And I remember my father was very skeptical. We did it with a huge TV back in the 1970s that weighed 400, 500 pounds. And you take the thing and you put your hands on, and then you go for a minute, and then somebody says, okay, you ready, set, go. And you go, put your fingers in the one corner of the chair. You got 4 people, one corner of the chair, and you lift it up, and it's absolutely, you can lift the person right up to the ceiling with 2 fingers. And that, nobody knows how that works either. But that's the kind of thing, is that there's a lot of stuff that we don't really understand. And so the way I describe it is, I say, when you take a look at it, you see that science will say they got things figured out, that they explain this, they explain that. And I absolutely assure you, science doesn't explain anything. They're describing what's going on. They're saying this happens, this happens. And the latest one that I got, which was kind of weird, that I didn't even realize, is you assume so many things. all the waves that are coming into your eyes, and there's what's called a binding thing that they don't know how it works. And there's something inside that's binding everything together. It's the sound and the smell and the taste and stuff like that. And it talked about this thing where, say, you see a UFO going really fast across your frame of vision. So it comes across here. This eye picks it up. And this eye is controlled by the other side of the brain. So the brains work opposite for the eyes. So the left eye will pick it up. It'll send a signal to the right eye. I'm picking something up. And remember, this is happening in like a second. It's coming across your field of vision. It comes across. This eye hasn't seen it yet. It says it's coming. And they did brainwave studies where they showed an alpha wave, and even before it gets there, this one starts doing a theta wave that says, I'm ready to get it, I'm ready to get it. It comes across, and these signals are coming into this eye to tell this eye that this thing's coming across, and it follows it across. And when you watch it, there's no break. There's no break in the thing. It's absolutely, you think both eyes are seeing it, and actually it's one eye sees it, sends a message to the other brain, and these brains are sending these signals back and tracking this thing as it goes across your thing. And you say, how does that work? And everyone goes, I have no clue. All you can say is this happens, then this happens, but that's just describing it. And that's what you'll see in science, that they just basically describe it. And that's what's happening in ufology, that we had this discussion before, and one of the people I follow is a guy, there's always this controversy in the UFO field. How much does the H-bomb? And the H-bomb wouldn't be developed until 2 years later, 1952. This is November of 1950 already. He's making this statement. Flying saucers exist. Their modus operandi is not known, but the Americans have a small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush trying to figure out what's going on. It's of tremendous significance to the Americans. And then the fifth thing he noticed was, as he stated, and the Americans also say, there's a number of other things associated with the flying saucers, such as mental phenomena. And the Americans aren't doing very well because they've said if we're working on the problem, they're willing to exchange credentials and talk to us. So already in 1950, the Americans knew that mental phenomena had something to do with UFOs. Now, how would they know that? Because the first person to talk to an alien was not till 1952. That was George Adamski. A couple of days after the detonation of the hydrogen bomb, suddenly these aliens are talking to him in the desert. So how did the Canadians know from the Americans in 1950? And we were guessing, but what we think is in Roswell, there was 3 live aliens and there was one dead. There was 3 dead aliens and 1 live alien, and the alien was talking in their heads. And if you're a military intelligence guy and there's an alien talking in your head, you go, "Oh, we'd love to get this. Like, how does this work?" And because you could go to Putin, you could go to, "This is God. We're telling you this." Yeah.
Did you mention Wilbur B. Smith by name, Wilbur Smith?
Yes, Smith was running the program.
I just want to point out, he went to UBC and he visited the Vancouver Flying Saucer Club, and I assumed that he was assassinated with fast-acting cancer. He died of cancer at the age of 52, and he told
62,
Canadians...
62.
Oh, he's 62?
He went, no, in 62 he was...
No, but he was about 52 years old.
He's 52 years old.
But I think, like, he said to people in Vancouver and other places, he saw the bodies in the craft. I think that's why they assassinated him.
Well, could be. Well, he told...
logical
I think I got the Vancouver lecture. I've got the actual... Wow. I got the lecture. Of
just what's your opinion?
I don't think he said that there. He said it to his son. I asked his son, I said, did your father... there was a story going around there was 6 people that worked with him on the inside. And one of them was telling the story that Wilbur Smith had seen the bodies and crafts out at an Air Force base outside of Washington, D.C. So then I was talking to his son, and I said to him, is that story true? Did your father ever tell you that story? He said, yeah, he told me that story.
Wow.
And I said, what, did he tell you? No, did you hear from someone else or your father tell you? He said, no, I heard it from my father. He was dying. He said he knew there was nothing more they could do to him. So he said, yeah, I saw the bodies and crafts. And of course, the first question you ask, of course, is, so were the bodies grays? And he said, no, they weren't grays. And this is one of these things that goes on in the UFO field that people don't really realize. There was no grays before. Nancy Tremaine, we helped Nancy Tremaine publish her first book. That was 1961. She was the first abduction. There was no grays before 1961.
Well, remember, just weeks ago, I interviewed Rolf, who lives 10 blocks from me. He saw 3 gray aliens during Nazi Germany in 1942 in his bedroom, and you can interview him. He's 90 years old. He lives at Commercial 11th. 3 gray aliens in his bedroom in 1942 in Nazi Germany.
Yeah, see, that would be a new one because...
I've done videos. I've done like 20 videos with him over years telling the story, and you can talk to him. He's 90 years old, lives with his 93-year-old wife.
Yeah.
You don't have much time left to talk to him, but I just did a 2-hour. But what's your opinion? Was Wilbur B. Smith assassinated?
No,
in your
I
view?
don't think so. No.
How did he get cancer so fast to die?
Well, I mean, he had cancer of the lower bowel. I mean, he knew I mean, lots of people die at 52.
Yeah, but in your opinion, it's a no-no to tell people you saw bodies in craft. You know he's not allowed to do that.
Well, he didn't do it until he was dying.
Well,
That's the difference. You said he said it in the Vancouver lecture. I
didn't know that. I didn't know that.
I've got the Vancouver lecture, and
Yeah.
he never said that publicly.
So maybe it wasn't murder. Maybe it wasn't murder.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
his wife was basically was the one that told me everything was going on, and he double copied double copied all his files. What he did say just before he died, he told his wife. He said to his wife, and I wrote a book on the Canadian project. He told his wife before he died. He said, "When I die, they're going to come and try to get my files," because he double copied everything. He made copies of everything, and he said, "I don't care who wants them. You just say you haven't got them." So what they did is they moved them to the son, the one that told me the story about him seeing the bodies, James. They moved the files to James's house, and she said, of course, as soon as he died, the Russians came, the Americans came,
Russians.
and the Canadians came, and they all wanted his files for
Ottawa?
purposes. Yeah, research purposes. And she said she burned the files. She said she destroyed the files, and then she said all the break-ins started at the house. And she said you could tell they were looking for something because nothing else was missing, but the house was broken into and they were looking for the files.
Wow.
And so the files were moved around for about 20 years, and then eventually they were put at the University of Ottawa, and now they're covering up the files there. They go in. I was in there to get them, and then they said, "Oh, you can only photograph one file at a time." And I said, "Why is that?" "Well, no, that's the rules." I said, "Just take forever. I mean, that's crazy.
Wow.
You can't photocopy everything in a file." So I said, "Where's the photocopy room?" It says down the hall. I go down the hall, photocopy everything, bring it back, and I was there for a day, but I didn't get much of it. And then somebody went in there and filmed the whole thing. So then I heard the same thing. They said, the guy said to me, "Oh, you can't get Smith's files. You're not allowed." And I went to his son and I said, "What's the deal here?" And he said, "That's not the rule. They were told it was for research purposes or whatever." So then somebody came to me again about this thing about the files. They said, "Okay, go to the University of Ottawa and tell them I've got every single file. Sue me. See what you can do." And then nobody did anything. So I've got all these files for anybody that wants to see his actual files. There's 10,000 pages of files that he double copied. But he knew as much as to know he was dealing with an alien by the name of Alpha. He wrote a book called A New Science that details how the world works. And again, it's the idea that he's interacting with the intelligence, and therefore the material in that book. Now, I don't know how many copies of the book. I gave one away. I've still got two. There may be 12 copies, 10 copies of that book in the world, and I've got two of them.
Wow.
Because they put it out in 1964, and the book was never finished. Wilbur died before he finished the last chapter, but it said right in the front, given to me by intelligence more advanced than we are. So all this material came in there, how the spin works in the atom and all this kind of stuff, and so I did all that kind of stuff, and then it progressed to the point where I watch like very high level people, like for example, another story that would show that they may not know as much as you think they know is there's a guy by the name of James Lakatsky, and he's another guy you should listen to, although he's only given 2 interviews that I'm aware of. He's the guy. He said, "My job is to take highly classified material and move it down to lower classifications." And if you remember this whole program that's being discussed in Congress now, it was called the OSAP program. This was Defense Intelligence, went to Skinwalker Ranch. They were doing all this research. They spent $22 million UFOs and stuff like that. And this guy is the guy that ran the program. And now he's sort of talking, and he's leaking stuff. And he's the guy that said in 2011, we had a meeting in a congressional facility. So people will say to you, "Oh, Congress doesn't know, they're hiding this stuff from Congress." Not true, because he said we were in the congressional facility, he said, and there was a senator in the room, and we were discussing this, and it was a long meeting for the whole day. I'll just tell you the one thing we talked about, and that was the fact that we have a craft, and we managed to get in it, which you sort of think, well, they got in it, whatever. And then I talked to another guy, his name is Jack Sarfati. He's a big-time physicist. He's been working on UFO propulsion for decades, thinks he knows everything and whatever. He told me a story. He had a guy who was in the Navy, and one of the crafts they have is in a Navy facility on the east coast of the United States. And they've got a lot of crafts, at least 12 crafts or something. And the idea is the crafts are being given to them. These are gifting. They're actually not really crashing. They're being done on purpose. But anyway, he said this craft, they had it on the coast, and he said they could not get in it because the craft is. I wrote a book called UFO Sky Pilots, where I talk about the fact that the craft is alive. The craft is actually conscious, and he said not only is it conscious, it actually has its own will, and that unless your mindset is proper, they won't even open the door. So they could not get in it. So it implied that it wasn't until 2000, what did you say, 2013 or 2012, that they actually got inside the craft because the craft wouldn't let them in. And so that's when he said, we have a craft and we managed to get in it, as if they finally got inside the craft. And then he said there was nothing in the craft. There was no engine, there was no propulsion system, there was no fuel tank. And then he said, so what are we really dealing with here? And this is where I get into this whole thing. It may not be what people think it is. It may not, like people say it's extraterrestrial, but if you listen to all the government departments, they'll say, yeah, we got films, yeah, we got this, but we got no proof of extraterrestrial intelligence. And they're playing a word game. They're saying, yeah, it's from somewhere, but what Semivan said is they don't know. Yeah, they've got bodies and crafts. And he said this briefing he got, he said they basically can't get in it. They can't do anything. It is basically way beyond them. And there's another physicist that I know very well. He's an astrophysicist who will be briefing Congress shortly. Everybody wants this guy to brief Congress because he has a lot of material. And he said that in 1989, they had the crafts at Area 51 and that they actually parked it. They just said, we can't do anything with this, and there's nothing they could do. And if you know the story, there was a guy by the name of Bob Bigelow, who is a billionaire in Las Vegas. And of course, he's looking at it from the money perspective, like if I can back engineer this stuff. So he's putting a lot of money in this, and he was involved in this OSAP program. He was the contractor. And he is actually pulled out for the last 15 years. He has not done anything. And the question is, if they were that close to technology, why would this guy go back to putting modules on the space station? That's what he does. That's his job. He's got this big thing. He's multimillionaire. He owns Comfort Suites. He owns that thing. So he's very rich. So why would he not be doing UFOs anymore for 15 years? Because he just gave up. He said he realized they weren't getting anywhere. And George Knapp, if you know, George Knapp is probably the main UFO reporter in the world. George Knapp says the same thing. I don't think they've gotten very far, and he's good friends with Bob Bigelow. So Bob Bigelow has pulled out of UFOs, and he's got all the money, and that was his whole thing, was the back engineer. And one of the stories was that Eric Davis, this physicist I was mentioning, they had gone to Lockheed. So Lockheed has always been rumored to be where they keep a lot of the crafts. And they'd gone to Lockheed, and they talked to a guy by the name of James Ryder. And James Ryder was a vice president there. And they had this craft, and they made an agreement when they make the agreement with the government to keep the craft, they have to have all this security. And people don't really realize that when you have a program, a black program, according to Eric Davis, they spend 10 times as much money on security as they do on the program. There's so much money spent on, and so people forget about this in the UFO field. Like, what's the security? Like, are they misleading you? Are they running disinformation? There's a lot of money put into protecting this flying saucer. And so they have made an agreement that they have to keep it forever. And they got to keep in the security. So Lockheed had this craft. They couldn't figure anything out. They had the thing, and they were spending piles of money. It was like money was flying out the door just to keep the security around this craft, so nobody could find out they had this craft. And so they had agreed to give it to Bob Bigelow. This is a big deal. This is the famous New York Times story. It's in the New York Times story, but it doesn't really detail it, where Bob Bigelow was changing his big facility in Las Vegas to take hardware. And he had the agreement they were going to move this craft from Lockheed Skunk Works to Bob Bigelow's facility in Las Vegas. And because Lockheed said, this vice president, this James Ryder, said, we couldn't figure it out. I mean, we can't do anything with this. It's just bleeding money. We don't want this thing anymore. If you guys want to back engineer, you can put money in it, we'll give you the craft. So they went to the U.S. Air Force and they went to the CIA, and both of them said, not only are you not going to give them the craft, you have made an agreement. You're going to keep the security forever. And so the craft is still at Lockheed, and according to Ryder, they just basically couldn't, because it's got this consciousness interface. And if you talk to, I wrote the book UFO Sky Pilots, and I've got 36 people, and I've got more now. 36 people, and that's the thing, is you listen to the people on the craft. So I have the download in 2012, and the download basically says to me, you had that question in 1975, that thing was flying away, and you said, somebody's got to know what's going on here. I just want to know what's going on here. They said, here's the answer. It's consciousness. And I'm going, consciousness. And it was like my head was spinning. It was like, oh, you know, it made sense. It was like ESP and this sort of stuff. And yet I said in 2012 I couldn't spell consciousness. Couldn't care less. I never had this come into my head. And so I'm walking around with this thing, and then it gradually sort of unfolded. There's different pieces were given to me how this actually worked. So 2013 I was speaking in Phoenix, Arizona, and the woman that was running this big group there, she said, "Oh, you're still going to talk to Pam Dupuis?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess so." I think I must have agreed to talk to Pam Dupuis or whatever. So she says, "Good, she's coming to my house on Monday. You can talk to her." So I go to this house on Monday. I'm sitting there, and she comes to the door and she says, "What did Stacy tell you about me?" And I go, "Nothing. I'm just supposed to talk to you." "That's good." She comes walking in with her partner, and they got a coffee pot and a pumpkin pie and all this, and she starts telling me all these stories. I'm a remote viewer for the government, and I was abducted, and I was 3 years old, and I saw the flying saucer flying away, and they were training us as kids to levitate balls. A story I've heard, these 3 different color balls where they take kids, very young kids, and they teach them to levitate these balls. One's easy, one's medium, and one's hard to do, and they're sitting in a circle. People will tell the story. They sit in a circle. They can't see the being. They can only see up to here, and they're levitating these balls with each other. And so she's telling all these stories. And it's like, yeah, whatever, she's telling these stories. And, I've heard all this stuff before. And then she says, "Oh, and last night I was flying the craft." And I go, "You were flying the craft?" And she goes, "Yeah, I was flying the craft." And all I could think in my head was Saudi Arabian women at that time. Couldn't drive a car unless there was a man in the car. And I'm going, "They let you fly the flying saucer, like no insurance, no license, nothing?" No, let me fly the craft. I've flown 3 different models. I'm going. I was at that point. I was thinking, like, time to throw this woman out of here. I mean, I thought, "You're insane." That's the end of that. And she said, "No," and I said, "Well, how do you fly a craft?" She says, "Oh, you do it with your mind." And suddenly, boom, quick. I was doing the consciousness thing, and suddenly this woman saying, "You fly with your mind?" And I said, "You do?" She said, "Yeah." They used to start, when they started with me, they put this band around my head, and then the band got smaller and smaller and smaller until I didn't need the band anymore. Wow. And she said, "You put your hand on something and you fly," and then suddenly all these people started coming to me, and I had 36 people that come to me, all telling me these stories. And the weird thing was, everybody told the same story. The craft is conscious, the craft is alive. And what you do is you touch the craft. So Chris Bledsoe, if you're famous Chris Bledsoe, he flew the craft. He said there was a thing in the middle of the craft. They told him, "Put your hand on top of this thing." He put his hand on there, and he said, then he took it off, and it was like a CD-ROM. There's all sort of the colors going through it, and he did that. And then some people put their hand on a panel on the wall. And the weird thing was, everybody touched something. And the idea was the craft was alive, and once you touch the craft, it's like a female thing. You become one. It's like one thing. You all become one, and whatever you think is what the craft does, and that's how they move the craft around. But the weird thing was, when I went after I released the book, they started telling me this thing, and I'm going, it's weird. Nobody touched the same thing. One had a joystick. One put their hand on a panel. One put the Air Force guy put his hand on the panel. One put their hand on a panel on the wall. One put a chair with fingers on the things on the end of the chair and stuff like that. And it's like the weird thing, like nobody touched the same thing, but they're all doing the same thing. And the craft is alive. And then the whole idea is there's no time and space. And you start to see this in quantum physics. The idea there may not be time and space. There's just here and now, and that's how they're moving it around. They're not really going anywhere. It's all vibration. It's all, and that's when Jim Semivan said, they asked him, like, why doesn't the government disclose this? And he said, consider the fact that the United States of America, 53% of people are reading at a grade 6 level. 22% of people in the United States are functionally illiterate. And I said, then you're going to take this and drop it on these people? That there's no time, there's no space, there's no out there, and this sort of thing. And that's what you start to see when you start really looking in depth on this flying saucer thing. It gets more complex and more complex and more complex and more complex. And the idea that it's just a simple thing and we've figured it out doesn't make sense. And so you get all the presidents like Obama, all these presidents, they'll say, yeah, we got the stuff and we don't know what's going on. And if Obama said that, I'm pretty sure Obama's not making up, because he's the guy that declassified Area 51 and stuff like that. So that's sort of my journey in terms of trying to analyze it. And as I said, I've talked to very high-level people. And one of the things that sort of backs that up is this Ron Pandolfi guy. And I will probably do some podcasts, and he's never sued me. I'm always, because I've talked about this guy probably 150 times, and he is one of the highest level people inside the CIA. He's been there since 1984, and his wife claims that she's an alien, and that the daughter is a half alien. That their daughter, that's the daughter's 7, she's 6 years old. She says, I'm only a half alien. My mother's a real alien, and it's like, wow, like where's she getting this from? She's 6 years old. She's getting it from her parents. And the one thing I caught him, and he's really angry. He always calls me the thief. He always says everything's loons, crooks, and worse. All the UFO people, loons, crooks, and worse. And then I always say to him, because he's a big conservation guy, and I say, well, that's better than being a hypocrite. You're briefing Donald Trump, and Donald Trump's kid is the biggest poacher in the damn world, and you're out there fighting poachers around the world and trying to kill poachers, and then you're not saying anything to Trump about his kid. And he said, well, I can't say anything bad about him. In a month, maybe I'll be free, indicating that he may be retiring or whatever. But he, at one point, he put a video that he was putting out videos, and his wife had a podcast on portals. So that's the other thing. I've written 2 books on portals. This idea that portals is how you move around. You move in whatever time and space or whatever. And he had the one. You got to remember, this is like one of the highest level people inside the CIA in the science and technology department. And he's on a cruise ship going through the Panama Canal, and he's sitting there, and his daughter's sitting on his lap, and his wife is the one that claims she came from wherever she came from, and her name is Aaliyah. So she's sitting there, and then this John Sillison guy is sitting right beside him. So she says, "Okay, footman." They always want to play the code game. So she's the princess, he's the footman that takes care of the princess, and you got to know all the code names. So she says, "Okay, footman, what do you got to say?" And he said, quote, and I can show the video. I've got the video. I've put it out numerous times. He says, "People have always wondered what it's like to go into the next world. There's been a breakthrough. The next time John goes to the desert, a number of us here in this room will go into the next world and come back again." And I went, "Thank you, Jesus." Oh, and I grabbed it off of his wife's YouTube channel, and he's always mad. He said, "That Cameron's a thief," because he had no expectation that anybody would see this, and that nobody would pay attention to it, that I would grab this and start broadcasting it over the internet. But here's this high-level guy saying there's been a breakthrough, and so he's basically saying loons, crooks, and worse, which says that if you're not talking portals, if you're not talking this thing about no time and space where you pop in and pop out, then you're a loon, crook, or worse. And that's his interpretation. And what you see is there's been a lot of stories about these portal things, and I'm sort of an expert. I think one of the jobs I had that I always get dragged in these things, these synchronicities drag me in. And one was doing Mission Rama. Mission Rama is a group of Latino people. There's 25,000 around the world, and they do a lot of this C5 thing where they go out and they meditate and they om and they do yoga and for 2 days, and you do all this sort of stuff, and then they have what's called a program sighting. So when I went there, this message came through Desta, who was in the car with me. We were going across the Nevada desert. This phone call comes in and says, "Oh, this is Adama knows Grant's coming to the mountain, and there's going to be a program sighting Saturday night." So they call it program sighting, which means they'll tell you to the minute when it's going to happen and where it's going to happen. So it's going to happen 4,000 feet up on the Mount Shasta mountain, 9:33, which is exactly what happened. 2 people predicted that. They call them antennas, the people that pick up the messages. And so I'm going there. And so I wrote up the whole Mission Rama thing. But what I was interested in is a number of times they've opened what they call a Zendra. So they'll sit there and like the one they had in 2020, there's people having a birthday party. It's 2:00 in the morning, and they're on what's called the sand flat. So there's all these trees, millions of trees, and then in the middle there's this one area. It's all sandy, and there's nothing growing there. And so they're sitting in the middle of this sand, what they call the sand flats. They're having this birthday party, and all of a sudden the one girl's an intuitive out of Mexico City, and she goes, "Adama's here." So this Adama is one of the other beings, and they're beings. And I say to people, you think that everything's grays? I defy anybody to go and find Mission Rama. There's 25,000. They've got all sorts of stories about the sightings they've had. Any Mission Rama person who's ever seen a gray, a reptilian, or a mantid, doesn't happen. Theirs is like they come out of the Bible. They got gowns on, they got beautiful hair. They all were describing like Michael Phelps, the swimmer, all muscular, and these beautiful like beings coming out of the craft. So Antarel was the one that I had the contact with, where this thing was flashing over my head, and then this one was Adama, but they had this birthday party, and then the one intuitive said, because Adama claimed he was going to come, and this is during COVID, and she said, Adama's here. And they go, how do you know? And you'll see this with experiencers. Once a person has touched the craft or been inside the craft, they can tell when the craft's coming. They know that day, I'm going to get abducted tonight. Something's going to happen. And they chain themselves to the bed, they do, the stuff to try to stop it, because they picked up the vibration. The craft is vibrating, and the beings are vibrating at a certain level. So when the craft's around, you can pick it up. So she's sitting there. She says, Adama's here. And they say, how do you know? He says, here, I know he's here. Oh, look, there's a light over there. That's right, he's over there. And they go, no, it's just a campsite. Somebody's got a camp light on there or something. He says, no, that's Adama. Huh. He says, we should go over there. And these 9 people go, are you kidding? It's pitch dark. You can't see your hand in front of your face. There's all holes in the ground and stuff. But somebody will break our leg. We're not going over there. She says, oh, okay. Huh. He says, we'll come there then. And so they go, what? And they go, this is like a herd of buffaloes going across. And then I got 3 of these people on camera, and I'm going to put it on my website. I'm going to put the actual interview, and it's kind of hard to watch because there's somebody translating the Spanish as these people are telling the story. And they start the story by saying, well, we're not proud, we're Latino, and they're very religious and stuff. And then we don't want to get involved. We don't want to be the center of the attention, whatever. And by the end of the interview, they're all fighting to talk. And anyway, so it's like these elephants coming, and they just freak out. They don't know what to do. So they all grab hands and they start oming. That's one of the things they do to raise their vibrations. So and they're oming, and they said, all of a sudden they said, holy cow, they're levitated in the air, and they're all floating in the air, and they're oming, and then they're really petrified because they're levitating, and the beings are coming, and then the one guy says, oh, and it was weird. It sounded like we were underwater. And I go, I didn't say it. They still don't know. I go, oh, they're in a Zendra. Because that's what people will say when you go in these Zendras where they open these things up. And the idea is that you raise your vibration, they lower their vibration, and you meet in between. You open up this thing. It looks like a half moon thing, all made out of this white fog type stuff. And then you go in, and 7 people at a time, and they have the beings. The being is there, and he's having conversations with 7 people at the same time. And I interviewed all these people, and on my YouTube site, I've got actual interviews with these people. You were inside the Zendra. What did you see? And they go, oh, it's 10 feet tall. You looked like Mike Phelps, the swimmer. He had boots on, and he had a big glowing sort of like energy coming out of his chest and stuff. And they all tell the same story. And so these people are levitated up in the air. And then I remember I said to the guy, I said, so Adama showed up? And he said, yeah, he was there. And I said, do you have any other beings? Yeah, he had beings with him. And usually they have a big tall one, and then they have 2 that are like 7 feet, these Adama type beings, 7 feet tall or 8 feet tall. So there's 3 of them, 2 shorter, 1 tall. And I said, so how many beings were there? And I still remember he said, there was as many beings as there was trees in the forest. And I said, that many? He said, that many. And they're all like angelic beings. So whereas somebody will see a gray, which the impression I think is that you're reflecting. So if you're in fear, you're going to see a gray. Same as if you have a near-death experience and you're fighting it, you're going to end up in this bad near-death experience that people talk about, that you're fighting it. You don't want to let go. The whole thing is surrender. In psychedelics, I wrote a book on psychedelics as well. You got to surrender. That's because I did 27 high-dose psilocybins, and I know about surrender. It's like I said, surrender is the rule. Believe me, surrender is the only rule. If you don't surrender, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And anyway, so these people are levitated up in the air, and then I said to them, well, how long did it last? They said, we have no idea how long it lasted. And suddenly it was over, and then some people were so scared, they actually packed up. It was like 3, 4 o'clock in the morning now. They packed up their car and left. They didn't even bother sleeping. And the other people were in the tent, and they said they could hear them they were walking around the tent appear. And of course he has the blonde hair and long blonde hair, and looks like he's come out of the Bible. But that's the whole thing. You see this reflection of the beings that you see are a lot influenced by, like you'll see reptilians. A lot of women who will see reptilians. It always has this sex angle to it. It's very high energy. And the first woman that was abducted before Betty and Barney Hill, we helped her publish her first book, and then she published a second book, and that was that whole story. It was just the wildest story ever. But
Is that Nancy Tremaine?
Nancy Tremaine, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And she won't do interviews or anything, but
Yeah, I tried.
yeah, she's still kind of.
She actually looks a bit like reptilian look, eh?
Yeah, the latest, but you got to remember, she's like 75 years old. She looks like, and she hung out with Jimmy Hoffa. She said, if you knew the life I
Jimmy
lived.
Hoffa, wow.
She was one of Hoffa's girls. She was a model and stuff like that.
Wow.
She was very pretty and stuff like that. And even at 62, I mean, she took a picture in a bikini at 62, and it's like, she looks like she's about 40.
We're getting old, Grant.
Yeah, no kidding. So that's what I've sort of done, and in the end, it comes down to this consciousness thing. So now I spend a lot of my time on what's the nature of reality. How does reality actually work? And if you realize that there is no physical world, this idea that everything is a field, now they've established. So an electron and a photon are fields inside a field. There's a big field, and what you're doing for an electron, all you're doing is measuring like the ocean, the wave. It's a wave in the ocean, and you're measuring that, but there is actually no particles. It's all fields. And this whole idea that when you start to understand that, you realize that these people are at a higher vibrating frequency. Or Tesla said, once you start looking at vibration and energy, then you're going to start making some progress as to how the world works. But we see it as this physical type thing. And when you get in the UFO field, I remember when I talked about consciousness first in 2012, and I didn't know what I was talking about at the beginning. I had no idea. I just know that was a message that was given to me. And the message that you get, the thing with contact modalities, when you talk to people who've been in the field and got a message, they will talk about what's called a knowing. I know this happened. I know this is the answer. It's not like I got an answer. It was the answer. This is how it works. And it's absolute certainty. Whereas what I say what's happening in science is people are guessing. You make a hypothesis. You take a guess. Oh, I think it's this. And then you do this experiment. Then you do observations. Then you make a conclusion. Then you make a new hypothesis. No, it looks like it's this now. And you just keep guessing. And you get closer to the answer as you go along. But you're still guessing. Whereas a lot of people in the field will talk about this certainty that when you're in the field, you know you're in the field, and what you're getting there is the actual material. So I'm writing the book on the channeler, and I'm comparing to all the modern channelers, and what you see is like basically 100% agreement. They all, over 175 years, say the same thing, exactly the same thing. Mm-hmm. The idea, and the basic idea is everything is one thing. Or you'll see if people do ayahuasca, they realize everything's conscious, alive, and connected. Everything's connected, everything's alive, and that's the idea that once you do that separation, or the separation from the divine, once you put everything together, that we're all together, we're all part of the same thing, then we work together. But if you realize that you're different and I'm in the right pattern, you're on the wrong pattern, then I can steal your stuff, I can kill you, I can do whatever, and that's what we're doing. We're this idea of separation, that once you get the separation, that is the main message, and love is the basis of the universe. Every channeler says that, every person who's had the experience on board the ship, or we'll talk about this thing, the surveys, they experienced 4,200 experiencers who had contact with non-human intelligence. They tested all these people, and what they found out was that like 90% had paranormal experiences. You'll see that when somebody has an experience, so suddenly they're psychic. Suddenly they got poltergeist in the house. Suddenly they got orbs flying around and stuff, and they think the house is haunted. No, it's you dragging this stuff in. It's like it comes with you. That it sort of opens up a veil where people get this stuff, and so I'm doing the channeling book, and then I'm doing another book on music, because music is people who do music.
This is the first book.
That's the first book, and musical people are very right brained. They're very female brained. They're not analytical, stuff like that.
Can we have Q&A soon? Like because it's been about an hour.
Yeah.
First, I want to take a survey. How many people actually live in Surrey? Yeah, so I've just made the decision. We're canceling the series of Surrey. We're going to move closer to Grant. There's a Coquitlam Library at the Lincoln SkyTrain station at the Coquitlam Mall. So this is the end of Surrey.
Well, this is a good place. Let's try this.
Well, it cost me $25, which is nothing. But with only 3 people from Surrey, she came from the west end of Vancouver. She came from the west end of Vancouver. There is no logical reason at all for us to be in Surrey. Absolutely not. We're moving. There's Coquitlam is a much bigger population.
That's farther out for her, even farther yet.
We're doing once a month in Vancouver Downtown Library. Yeah. Once a month where you live in Coquitlam.
But Vancouver has the problem that you get more than 8 people.
It's like $280 to rent a room in Vancouver Library, and $25 for this room. So we'll do 1 month Vancouver, 1 month in Coquitlam. There's a big population basin in Coquitlam. We have Terry Tabando lives right there by the library.
Yeah. Oh, I'm close.
Yeah, he's been here for 32 years, and he has a whole basin of people living. So this is the end of Surrey. So you're gonna have to go to
Vote on
Coquitlam. All right, so now it's Q&A time. Hands up, Q&A. Go ahead. Anybody questions?
Oh, I have a question, Greg.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on the Skywatcher project and psionics?
I've been sort of fighting with them. That's where you see this whole idea about the reflective phenomena. That what you have is they picked up 9 objects, 9 different types of objects. And if you take a look at their objects, none of them are the same as other UFO objects.
Right.
And so the question is like, what is the intelligence doing? It's almost like, I call it awe and curiosity. What they want is they don't want to tell you what's going on. They just want to make you go, what the heck's going on? What's this crop circle? Like, why is this cattle mutilated? Like, what is going on here? They want you to be in awe and curiosity to try to figure it out. So what they're doing is they keep changing it. People don't realize, and I say, because I've been at it for 50 years, so I always say to people, you got to remember that what happened now didn't happen in 1975. What happened in 75 doesn't happen now. That in 75, it was simple. There was landing places where it would land. It would leave pot marks on the ground. It would burn the grass. It would swirl the grass or whatever and stuff like that. And there hasn't been one of those in 25, at least 25 years.
Wow.
Not one in 25 years. No landings in 25 years. So what's going on? If you go back to 1896, what you see is wooden ships with propellers and balloons and these big lights. And batteries didn't get developed till maybe 10 years later. So what are they running these big lights on? So it was paranormal. These lights are shining down, and they got guys hanging off of ropes, and they're talking in rhymes and riddles and saying they're from Mars. And in Wilbur Smith's day, the being they were dealing with his name was Alpha, and he claimed he was from Uranus. And I remember the head metallurgist who lived in Manitoba had said to me, he didn't want to talk to me, but Mrs. Smith said, you got to talk to this man. He came all the way to Ottawa to talk to me, you're going to talk to him. So I went to him, and he was this whole deal that he said, Grant, let me absolutely assure you, at no time did Wilbur Smith or I ever believe Alpha was from Uranus, not from 1 second. And that was this whole thing. So people in the early 1900s believed that Mars was inhabited or Venus was inhabited. So they first said that, and then when everybody suddenly realized, oh, they're not inhabited, then suddenly they're from Zeta Reticuli, and they're from the Pleiades and all this sort of stuff. And then in the 1960s, suddenly it's multidimensional. So now you hear stuff, they're from the fifth dimension.
Zeta Reticuli? I have my heart set on Zeta Reticuli. Benedict Barney Hill. Isn't it true that they came from Zeta Reticuli, those grays?
It was the only place it came. It came out of government information from a guy by the name of Condor, who first brought up this thing, and the star map where they sort of got it. So
Betty did say that. They did tell Betty.
Well, they tell you that's the thing.
Is it true?
But when you go and ask,
you're gonna break my heart, Grant. You're gonna break my heart.
Okay, I'm going to break your heart a little bit more. So I actually talk to people like have the experience. So I say, anybody here has had an experience with a being. The first thing I want you to go is the next time the being comes, say, are you actually an alien? And see what he says. There's Sherry Wilde, who had one of the most famous books.
We had her as a guest too.
She wrote The Forgotten Promise, which is the whole idea that we come into the world, we make a promise, and she had made a promise that she was going to put out this book for them and stuff, and she didn't want any part. She tried to commit suicide. She tried to block this thing, everything she could, and she finished the book, and her daughter had an injunction to stop her from publishing the book. She took it to the publisher, and the publisher said, Betty, you said this thing's from, he says he's from Andromeda. And she said, yeah, that's what he said. And he said, well, you said he's a grade, didn't you? Like he's a Zeta? Yeah, he's a Zeta. Well, then he can't be from Andromeda. He's got to be from Zeta Reticuli.
That's another galaxy.
And she said, well, it can't be. He's got to be from Zeta Reticuli. If he's a grade.
It's very close.
And she
says,
says,
the audience is 39 light years away, right? It's very close to Earth.
Yeah, but there's the thing. It was different. So she says, really? So and everybody has a thing. You'll see these patterns. So if you're on board the ship and you have people, I always say to the people, I just cut to the chase. I say, okay, what was the name of the guy you're dealing with? And he goes, oh, that was Da, that was LB, and there's always a person, and you wonder, like, is this actual person or is this a spirit guide? Is this a play? Is this something that's being played? And so his name was Da, and he was a gray. So Da comes and she goes, okay, so what the hell's going on here? Are you an alien? You said you're from Zeta, you said you're from Andromeda, and stuff. And he goes, and I quote because it's an important line, so I actually quote the line what he said. No, that would not best describe who I actually am. I'm an etheric being on a mission in the cosmos for the Creator. And she said, really? So why do you come as this gray, this ugly looking gray thing? And he goes, ugly? You think I look ugly? And she said, well, you're scared of living Delhi side. Every time you come, you block my memory, and then I don't remember who you are, and then I get scared again, and you do this over and over again to me. And then he said, well, it's more functional. It's more functional than to make a human body, and we need the body when we come in to work in the world. So basically, the idea is they're not really physical. I'm an etheric being, which we all are.
Yeah.
Remember who you actually are. You're not the puppet on the stage. You're an etheric being playing a human. They're an etheric being playing an alien.
Yeah.
So he said, I'm an etheric being in our mission in the cosmos for the Creator. And then he says, well, Sherry, you ever look in the mirror? And she goes, what do you mean? Well, you look in the mirror, you got those big teeth. Every time you smile at us, we think you're going to eat us. So that she asked, and then I had these beings in Great Britain that they were channeling through these two women, and they called themselves CHON, C-H-O-N, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen. And they basically were saying, we're these beings, and they didn't have any hands and feet and stuff like that. And they said, they had all these messages and stuff, so they said they wanted me to interview them.